Starlight Serenade. An Alphabet Sweetheart's Romance. Written by Susanne. Please like and subscribe. Chapter 1. Celeste. I pause on Hazel Elliott's front porch, trying to shake the restless feeling that's been following me around Juniper Falls like a shadow. 3 months in this charming mountain town, and I still feel like I'm floating just outside the edges of things, never quite landing. The charm bracelet jingles before Hazel even opens the door, and despite my mood, I find myself smiling. That gentle chiming has become one of my favorite sounds since moving here. It always means warmth, wisdom, and the best chamomile tea this side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Celeste, dear, perfect timing. Hazel's green eyes twinkle as she steps aside. I just put the kettle on. I follow her into the house, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and lemon balm. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I was walking past and saw your cosmos blooming. Never mind stopping by. That's what neighbors are for. Hazel waves away my concern as she bustles toward the kitchen. Those cosmos are having their last hurrah before the frost gets them. Rather like some of us, I suppose. I settle into my usual chair by the window, watching the late afternoon sun catch the silver threads in my auburn curls. 58 years old and starting over. Sometimes I can't decide if that makes me brave or foolish. You seem a bit melancholy today, Hazel observes, returning with her fairy tale tea service. Rough week? Not rough, exactly. I accept my cup gratefully, wrapping my fingers around the warmth. I went to the farmer's market, the library book sale, the craft fair. I'm attending things, meeting people, but I still feel like I'm watching from the outside looking in. Hazel settles across from me. It takes time to find your place in a new community. Especially when you're starting fresh at our age. Those articles about reinventing yourself after 50 never mention how lonely authentic can feel when you don't know where you belong. Oh, honey. Hazel's voice is gentle. Those articles are written by people who've never actually had to start completely over. The understanding in her voice makes my throat tight. This is exactly why I've grown so fond of Hazel. She sees straight to the heart of things. I keep telling myself the universe brought me here for a reason, I say, fingering the moonstone pendant at my throat. But some days I wonder if I misread the signs entirely. What kind of signs are you looking for? Connection, I suppose. A sense of purpose. Something that makes me feel like I belong here. Hazel is quiet for a moment, and I can practically see the wheels turning. Something I've learned about my new friend is that after 30 years of teaching, she's developed an almost supernatural ability to solve problems. Especially the kind that involve bringing the right people together. You know, she says finally, I've been thinking about the stars a lot lately. Have you noticed how bright Venus has been? I blink at the sudden change of subject. She's beautiful right now. Though technically, Venus is a planet. We just call her the evening star. Because sometimes the old names feel more true than the facts, Hazel finishes with a knowing look. Speaking of stars, did I ever mention our annual Stargazing Night? I shake my head, suddenly alert. I've learned to recognize that particular gleam in Hazel's eyes. It's a wonderful tradition. Started 15 years ago by Walter Bennett. Everyone around here calls him Walt. He's been running it by himself since his co-host just moved to Florida, she says. That's too bad. Must be difficult managing alone. Oh, Walt would insist he can handle it perfectly well by himself. Hazel's smile turns mischievous. He's wonderfully stubborn that way. But last autumn we had nearly 200 people spread across blankets in the meadow behind the library. I can picture it. Families clustered under the vast darkness, children pointing at constellations. It sounds magical. It is. Though I suspect it could be even more magical with a little help. Hazel pauses, watching me over her teacup. From someone who understands that looking at stars is about more than just identifying celestial objects. The suggestion hangs in the air, gentle but unmistakable. My chest flutters with excitement and nervousness. This is exactly what I was talking about. A chance to find my place. But putting myself forward feels like stepping onto thin ice. I don't know, Hazel. My approach might be different from what people expect. Different how? I don't just talk about the technical aspects. I talk about stories, mythology, the way ancient cultures built belief systems around the stars. Some people think that's too fanciful. And some people think chamomile tea is just dried weeds, Hazel says firmly, but that doesn't stop it from soothing a troubled heart. Her words settle something inside me. This is why I moved to Juniper Falls. To find people who understand there's more than one way to see the world. You really think someone like Walt would be open to that kind of collaboration? I think Walt could use a reminder that wonder and facts can coexist beautifully. And I think you could use a chance to share your gifts with people who will appreciate them. The flutter in my chest intensifies, but excitement outweighs nervousness this time. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for permission to belong. All right, I say, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounds. I'm interested. Wonderful. Hazel claps her hands together, charm bracelet jingling. I know exactly where to find him tomorrow afternoon. He'll be at Novel Sips around 2. Always stops for coffee before his weekly grocery run. Should I prepare anything? Just bring yourself, dear. And maybe that astrology book you're always reading. Hazel's eyes twinkle. Walt does love a good intellectual challenge. As I finish my tea and prepare to leave, genuine anticipation settles in my chest. Not the nervous kind from my first weeks here, but the kind that makes me want to see what tomorrow might bring. Walking home through the quiet streets, I look up at the sky. Venus isn't visible yet in the late afternoon light, but I know she's there, waiting for darkness to reveal her brilliance. Maybe some things are worth waiting for the right moment to shine. I meet Hazel outside Novel Sips at 1:45, clutching my well-worn copy of Venus Rising, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Hearts, and trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. The bookstore cafe has become one of my favorite spots in Juniper Falls, with its mismatched chairs, towering bookshelves, and the perpetual scent of coffee and old paper. He's usually here by now, Hazel says, checking her watch. Creature of habit, our Walt. Through the window, I can see Andrew Carter behind the counter, steaming milk with focused intensity. I wonder if I should hide my astrology book. Maybe ease into that part of who I am. The thought makes me pause. Isn't this exactly what I promised myself I wouldn't do anymore? Dim my light to make others comfortable? There he is, Hazel murmurs as a tall, lean man approaches from the direction of the parking area. He looks like he's spent most of his life outdoors. Silver hair tucked under a worn baseball cap, flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and boots that have seen serious hiking. His hazel eyes scan the street with methodical attention. Walt. Hazel calls out, waving him over. Perfect timing. He removes his cap as he approaches, revealing thick silver hair. Hazel. Didn't expect to see you here. I wanted you to meet someone. She beams, gesturing toward me. Walt, this is Celeste Morgan. Celeste, this is Walter Bennett. Ms. Morgan. His handshake is firm, calloused. Hazel mentioned you might be interested in the stargazing event. I am, very much so. I slip my astrology book behind my back, which is ridiculous. I've been setting up my telescope in the meadow behind the library. You have your own telescope? Something in his expression shifts, becomes more interested. What kind? Celestron Schmidt Cassegrain. 8-inch aperture. I can't help smiling at his surprised look. What, did you expect opera glasses? The corner of his mouth twitches. Not quite a smile, but close. Most people who say they're interested in astronomy mean they like looking at pretty pictures online. Well, I'm not most people. No, he says, studying my face. I'm beginning to see that. Why don't you two go get some coffee and chat? Hazel suggests with the expression I've come to recognize as her matchmaking face. I need to pick up a few things at Burke's General Store. Before either of us can protest, she's walking away, leaving us standing on the sidewalk in increasingly awkward silence. Coffee? I suggest. Inside, Andrew greets Walt with easy familiarity. The regular? Large black coffee, no sugar? That's fine. Walt pulls out his wallet, then glances at me. What can I get you? Lavender latte, please. With oat milk. I catch Walt's slight frown at my order. Apparently lavender lattes fall into some category of frivolousness, but he pays without comment. We settle at a corner table, his plain black coffee and my purple-tinted latte creating an almost comical contrast. So, he says, wrapping his hands around his mug. What's your background? I've been studying the stars for most of my life. Started with my grandmother when I was 7. I take a sip of my latte, gathering courage. I approach stargazing from both scientific and cultural perspectives. Cultural perspectives? The mythology, the way different civilizations interpreted the same patterns. How Venus was Aphrodite to the Greeks, Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs. The stories we tell about what we see up there. Walt's grip tightens on his mug. Stories are fine as entertainment. But the event focuses on actual astronomy. Facts, not folklore. Of course the scientific foundation is important. I lean forward. But people connect with stories. When you tell a child those 7 stars are Ursa Major, that's just information. When you tell them it's a great bear roaming the northern sky, suddenly they can see it. The story also makes it less accurate. Walt's voice has cooled. Those stars aren't actually related, they're at completely different distances. Calling them a bear is just human projection onto random points of light. I set down my latte carefully, recognizing the tone. Random points of light that helped humans navigate for thousands of years. Just because something is mythological doesn't make it meaningless. And just because something has historical significance doesn't make it scientifically relevant. His eyes have gone flint hard. Astrology helped people navigate too, but that doesn't mean we should teach children that Jupiter's position affects their personality. The word astrology hangs between us like a challenge. I could deflect, keep things safe. But I'm tired of being safe. Actually, I say, reaching for my book, I think there's value in understanding how our ancestors made sense of their world. Walt's gaze drops to the book, and I watch his expression shift to something closer to disgust. Venus Rising, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Hearts. He reads the title like it tastes bitter. Let me guess. You're one of those people who thinks Mercury retrograde explains why your car won't start. Heat flashes up my neck. I'm one of those people who thinks there's more to the universe than what we can measure in a laboratory. Right. Walt stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Well, Ms. Morgan, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The Stargazing Night is about real science, not whatever this is. He gestures dismissively at my book. We use telescopes to observe actual celestial mechanics, not to validate superstitions. Superstitions? The word comes out sharper than intended. Mr. Bennett, I have a degree in astronomy from UNC. I've been tracking celestial movements for 40 years. Just because I also appreciate the cultural significance doesn't make me some crystal-waving fortune teller. But he's already reaching for his cap, his face set in stubborn dismissal. I'm sure Hazel meant well, but this isn't going to work. The last thing our event needs is someone filling people's heads with starry-eyed nonsense. Starry-eyed nonsense. The phrase hits like a slap, bringing back every dismissive comment from my ex-husband, every colleague who thought my interests were too whimsical. I stand too, clutching my book like armor. You know what? You're absolutely right. This isn't going to work. Because the last thing I need is to work with someone who's so afraid of wonder that he's forgotten what made him love the stars in the first place. Walt's jaw tightens, and for a moment I think he might respond. Instead, he turns and stalks toward the door, muttering something that sounds like "damn matchmakers." I sink back into my chair as the door chimes his exit, my heart pounding with anger and disappointment. Around me, the cafe returns to its normal hum, but I feel like I'm sitting in a crater. Andrew appears with a concerned expression and a plate of oatmeal cookies. Rough meeting? You could say that. I accept a cookie, surprised my hands are shaking. Do you know him well? Been coming in here for years. Good guy, usually. A little gruff, maybe, but he's had a tough time since his wife died. Andrew hesitates. Sometimes loneliness makes people prickly. I consider this, watching pedestrians pass by the window. Lonely I can understand. But dismissive? That's harder to forgive. My phone buzzes with a text from Hazel. How did it go? I stare at the message, then type back, I think we might be astronomically incompatible. Some alignments, apparently, are just too far apart to bridge.
Chapter 2. Walt. I slam the truck door harder than necessary and stomp up the steps to the ranger station, still muttering about meddling matchmakers and their ridiculous schemes. The nerve of Hazel, setting me up with some crystal-gazing mystic who probably thinks Saturn's rings affect her mood. Ben Holloway looks up from his paperwork as I barrel through the door, one eyebrow raised in that infuriatingly calm way he has. Let me guess. The coffee meeting didn't go well. That wasn't a meeting, that was an ambush. I drop into the chair across from his desk with more force than the old one deserves. Hazel knew exactly what she was doing. Which was trying to saddle me with some new age flake who thinks astrology belongs at a serious astronomy event. I pull off my cap and run a hand through my hair. Do you know what she was reading? Some book about Venus and ancient wisdom. Ben sets down his pen and leans back, studying me with those steady brown eyes that have been seeing through my nonsense since we were kids. That's not exactly a crime. It's not astronomy, it's mythology. There's a difference. Is there? I seem to remember you telling some pretty elaborate stories about constellations at last year's event. Something about Perseus rescuing Andromeda? I waved my hand dismissively. That's different. Those are traditional constellation stories, educational. This woman started talking about how stories make the Bear constellation more accessible to children, then pulled out an astrology book when I mentioned that calling random points of light a bear is just projection. Ah. Ben picks up a pencil and starts twirling it between his fingers. So when you tell stories, it's education. When she suggests stories help kids connect with astronomy, it's nonsense. When I tell stories, they're clearly labeled as mythology. When she carries around books about Venus and ancient wisdom, she's mixing science with superstition. The distinction feels important, even if I can't articulate why. She smelled like a health food store, Ben. Sandalwood and lavender. You're complaining about how she smells now? And she ordered a lavender latte. Purple coffee. Ben's mouth twitches like he's fighting a smile. Walt, you're 65 and getting worked up about someone's coffee order. I'm not worked up. Right. He stops twirling the pencil and fixes me with that look. Want to know what I think? Not particularly. I think you're scared. The words hit like a slap. Scared? Of what? Scared of being challenged. Scared of having your controlled little event disrupted by someone who might do things differently. Ben leans forward, his voice gentle but relentless. When's the last time someone questioned your methods instead of just accepting them as fact? I defend my methods all the time. No, you correct people who are wrong about facts. That's different from having someone challenge your entire approach. Ben taps the pencil against his desk. This woman has an astronomy degree from UNC, right? I shift uncomfortably. So she says. So she's not some random person. She's someone with credentials who happens to see the stars differently than you do. The pencil stops tapping. And that bothers you. It's impractical. You can't run an event with two completely different philosophies. Did she offer to read horoscopes? I think back to our conversation. Stories about Venus in different cultures. Mythology making science accessible. She talked about ancient civilizations, I admit. How they interpreted celestial movements. Sounds educational to me. It's a slippery slope. I've spent 15 years building this event's credibility. I'm not letting some newcomer turn it into a cosmic counseling session. Ben is quiet for a long moment, studying my face with that penetrating stare that made him such a good ranger. You know what your problem is, Walt? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You've gotten so comfortable being the expert that you've forgotten what it feels like to be curious. He sets the pencil down carefully. When's the last time someone showed you something about the stars that you didn't already know? The question catches me off guard. When did I last feel that spark of discovery, that sense of wonder that first drew me to astronomy? Teaching high school, running events, it's all become routine, familiar patterns I could perform in my sleep. That's not the point. Isn't it? You started this event because you wanted to help people fall in love with the night sky. When did protecting your methods become more important than that goal? I don't have an answer. Or rather, I do, but I don't want to examine it. When Ellen died, everything changed. The enthusiasm, the joy, it all went gray, replaced by routine and responsibility. The event works fine the way it is. Does it? Or have you been going through the motions so long you've forgotten what fine actually looks like? I stand abruptly, needing to move. I didn't come here for therapy. I came to complain about Hazel's meddling. And instead you got perspective. He grins, unrepentant. That's what friends are for. Some friend. I'm just pointing out that maybe you reacted so strongly because this woman represents something you're not ready to deal with. Which is change. The possibility that there might be more than one right way to share your love of the stars. I grab my cap, jamming it back on my head. The stars don't need me to love them differently. True. But you're not the same as you've always been. The words follow me out to the parking lot, where the afternoon sun feels too bright. I sit in my truck for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to shake off the uncomfortable truth of Ben's observations. Change. Growth. The possibility that I might be wrong. I start the engine, but I can't escape the image of Hazel eyes challenging me across a coffee table, or the memory of a voice saying I'd forgotten what made me love the stars in the first place. I'm barely through my front door when the phone rings. Hello, Hazel. Walter Bennett, we need to talk. I drop my keys on the kitchen counter and lean against it, already feeling tired. If this is about this afternoon, it's about the Stargazing Night. Her voice has that steel-wrapped in velvet quality that used to terrify third graders into good behavior. And about you being a stubborn old fool. Hazel. No, you listen. I've been organizing community events in this town for 40 years, and I know when someone is letting their pride get in the way of good sense. I massage my temples, where a headache is starting to bloom. She's not a good fit for the event. Because she sees the stars differently than you do? Walt, honey, that's exactly why she would be a good fit. I hear the familiar jingle of her charm bracelet, which means she's settling in for a long conversation. This event has gotten too big for one person to handle alone. 200 people last year, and you looked exhausted by the end of it. It works. It works, barely. But you're burning yourself out trying to be everywhere at once, and the quality is starting to suffer because of it. Her voice softens slightly. You used to love this event, Walt. Now you just survive it. The words echo what Ben said earlier, and I find myself gripping the phone tighter. What do you want, Hazel? I want you to give her one more chance. Meet at the library tomorrow afternoon. Neutral ground. Plan the event like the professionals you both are. Her voice softens slightly. For the sake of community tradition, if nothing else. I stare out my kitchen window at the darkening sky. Venus is just becoming visible above the tree line, bright and steady. Ellen used to call it the promised star. The first hint that the night would bring wonders. She thinks astrology is science, Hazel. And you think science is the only way to understand the universe. Maybe you're both right. Maybe you're both wrong. Maybe it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Despite myself, I'm curious about what Celeste Morgan might bring to a planning session. She did have good equipment, and she clearly knows her way around the technical aspects. And if I'm being honest, the event could use another qualified person. One meeting, I say finally. Planning only. If it doesn't work out, I'm running the event alone. Fair enough. 4 o'clock tomorrow at the library. Don't be late. She hangs up before I can change my mind, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and the uncomfortable feeling that I've just been expertly maneuvered. I arrive at the Juniper Falls Library 5 minutes early, armed with my clipboard, event timeline, and a healthy dose of skepticism. Grace Lawson greets me with a warm smile and directs me to the meeting room, where Celeste is already seated at the long table. She's traded yesterday's flowing skirt for practical jeans and a burgundy sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun. Spread in front of her are star charts, a notebook filled with careful handwriting, and what appears to be a detailed agenda. No astrology book in sight. Mr. Bennett. She looks up as I enter, her expression politely neutral. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Ms. Morgan. I take the seat across from her, setting down my own materials. Hazel can be very persuasive. That she can. A small smile tugs at the corner of her mouth. I took the liberty of reviewing the event information on the community website. You've built something impressive over the years. The compliment catches me off guard. It's grown beyond what I originally envisioned. Growth isn't always easy to manage. She opens her notebook, and I catch a glimpse of neat bullet points and sketch diagrams. I brought some ideas for how we might divide responsibilities, if you're interested. I lean back in my chair, studying her. This isn't the crystal-waving mystic I expected. This is someone who's done her homework. All right. What did you have in mind? She flips to a clean page in her notebook. Well, you clearly have the technical expertise and equipment logistics covered. You know what works, what doesn't, and how to handle the crowd flow. She pauses, pen hovering over the paper. I was thinking I could focus on the storytelling component. Helping people connect with what they're seeing. Storytelling. Constellation myths, cultural astronomy, the historical significance of celestial events. Her voice is steady, professional. Ways to make the science more accessible to families with children. I consider this. It's not astrology, exactly, though I suspect the line between mythology and mysticism might be blurrier than I prefer. Still, she's clearly trying to meet me halfway. What about the guided observations? The actual telescope work? I assumed we coordinate on that. You handle the technical explanations, I handle the context. She draws a quick diagram showing different stations around the meadow. Maybe we could set up themed areas. Planets, deep sky objects, constellation stories. Despite myself, I'm intrigued. The event has always been somewhat chaotic, with people clustering around whoever has the most interesting telescope at any given moment. A more organized approach might actually improve the experience. You've given this some thought. I have. She meets my eyes directly. I know yesterday didn't go well, but I really do want to contribute something meaningful to this community. This seemed like a good place to start. There's something in her voice, a vulnerability beneath the professional competence, that reminds me why I started the stargazing events in the first place. Not to showcase my expertise, but to share something I loved with people who might discover they loved it too. What about equipment? You mentioned an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. And a smaller refractor that's perfect for lunar observations. Plus I have red filtered flashlights, star charts, and a portable table for displays. She flips to another page in her notebook. I also brought some sample materials if you'd like to see my approach to the storytelling component. She slides a laminated sheet across the table. It's a beautifully illustrated guide to Cassiopeia, complete with the constellation's mythology, its location relative to other star patterns, and interesting facts about its component stars. The information is accurate, accessible, and presented in a way that would appeal to both children and adults. You made this? I have a background in education. She pulls out another sheet, this one focused on Jupiter and its moons. I believe in making science approachable without dumbing it down. I study the materials, impressed despite myself by the quality and accuracy. This isn't New Age fluff. It's solid educational content with an emphasis on engagement. These are good, I admit. Professional quality. Thank you. She relaxes slightly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. I know we see things differently, but I think we both want the same thing. To help people appreciate the wonder of the night sky. I set the materials down carefully, weighing my words. Ms. Morgan. Celeste. Please. Celeste. I owe you an apology for yesterday. I was resistant to change. And I was perhaps too quick to assume you'd be open to collaboration. She folds her hands in her lap. We both made assumptions. So where does that leave us? She's quiet for a moment, studying the star charts spread between us. It leaves us with an event to plan and a community that deserves our best effort. Maybe we can find a way to make this work. I look at her materials again, then at my own rigid timeline and equipment lists. For the first time in years, I feel a spark of genuine excitement about the stargazing event. All right, I say, reaching for my pen. Let's see what we can build together.
Chapter 3. Celeste. I arrive at the meadow behind the library 20 minutes early. The late afternoon sun slants through the trees, and I can already picture families spread across blankets under a canopy of stars. Walt's truck pulls up just as I'm testing spots for telescope placement. He climbs out carrying a clipboard and what appears to be a hand-drawn map, his silver hair catching the light as he removes his baseball cap. "You're early," he observes. Couldn't help myself. I wanted to get a feel for the space. I gesture toward the meadow, which opens up from the library toward a line of pine trees. It's perfect. The sightlines are incredible, and we're far enough from town to minimize light pollution. He stops beside me, following my gaze. The flat terrain works well for crowd management too. People can spread out naturally without anyone blocking views. Exactly. I pull out my notebook, flipping to yesterday's sketches. I was thinking main telescope stations along this ridge, with the storytelling area down by those boulders. Walt unfolds his map, and I'm impressed by the detail. Every tree marked, elevation changes noted, even parking clearly indicated. This is the work of someone who takes logistics seriously. The prevailing wind comes from the northwest, he says, pointing toward the tree line. We'll want to position telescopes to minimize vibration. Good point. I make a note. What about power for the red lights? There's an outlet on the library's back wall. I've run extension cords before, but we need to be careful about placement. Can't have people tripping in the dark. We spend the next hour mapping the space. Walt knows every quirk of the terrain. Where water pools after rain, which direction offers the clearest view of Venus, even which spots attract mosquitoes. His knowledge is impressive, accumulated through 15 years here. You really know this place, I say as we finish marking the children's activity area. Comes with the territory. He folds his map carefully. Though seeing it through fresh eyes is illuminating. A breeze rustles through the trees, sending autumn leaves drifting across the meadow. The late afternoon light has turned golden, and Venus is just becoming visible in the deepening sky. You know, I say, unable to resist, this space has some serious romantic energy. Walt stops and stares at me. Romantic energy? Oh, come on. Even you have to admit this place is romantic. All this natural beauty, people sharing wonder under the stars. It's a meadow, Celeste. Grass and trees and astronomical phenomena. Astronomical phenomena that have been inspiring romance for thousands of years. I spread my arms wide. Venus rising over a moonlit field, couples pointing out constellations, children making wishes on shooting stars. This place practically vibrates with romantic possibility. Walt groans audibly. Please tell me you're not planning to work that into your presentation. Maybe a little. I grin at his horrified expression. Come on, Walt. Half the couples in this town probably had their first kiss under these stars. That's not relevant to astronomical education. Maybe not directly, but it's part of what draws people to stargazing. The sense of mystery, of connection to something larger. I turn in a slow circle. This isn't just a venue, it's a place where magic happens. Magic. Walt's voice is flat, but when I glance at him, I catch something that might be amusement in his hazel eyes. You realize what you're calling magic is actually atmospheric refraction, stellar parallax, and psychological projection onto random celestial events. See? Even your scientific explanation sounds romantic. I laugh at his exasperated expression. You're basically describing how the universe conspires to make everything more beautiful. Walt shakes his head, but I swear I see the corner of his mouth twitch. He turns to study his clipboard, but not before I catch what looks suspiciously like a smile. We should focus on practical concerns, he says carefully. Crowd flow, equipment security, emergency procedures. Of course. Very practical. I follow him toward the telescope area, but I can't suppress my grin. For all his resistance to sentiment, Walt Bennett is not immune to this place's magic. He just won't admit it. We spend another 30 minutes on logistics, and I'm struck by how well we complement each other. Where I see possibilities, he sees problems to solve. Where he focuses on technical requirements, I think about human experience. I think that covers the major elements, Walt says finally, checking his list. Setup at 4, event begins at 7, main programming ends at 10 for the families with young children. And the die-hard stargazers? Usually stick around until midnight or later, depending on what's visible. He makes a note on his clipboard. We'll keep a few telescopes available for the night owls. Perfect. I close my notebook, genuinely excited. Walt, I know yesterday got off wrong, but I really think this is going to work. He looks up from his clipboard, expression unguarded for a moment. I think you might be right. The admission seems to surprise him. We stand in the gathering dusk, and I realize how quickly the time has passed. The sun is getting low, painting the meadow in golden light. You know, I say, pulling a thermos from my bag, I brought some tea and snacks. Would you like to stay a bit longer? See how the space feels as it gets darker? Walt glances at his watch, then at the thermos in my hands. For a moment I think he's going to decline, retreat to the safety of his truck and his evening routine. Then he nods. That would be practical. Good to know how the lighting changes affect visibility. I hide my smile at his need to justify staying. Absolutely. Very practical. I spread a small blanket on the grass near the boulders, and Walt settles beside me with the careful movements of someone who doesn't often sit on the ground anymore. The thermos releases the scent of chamomile and honey as I pour tea into 2 travel mugs. Homemade, he asks, accepting his cup. My grandmother's recipe. Chamomile, a touch of lavender, and local honey. I pull out a container of trail mix full of almonds, dried cranberries, and dark chocolate chips. She always said the best stargazing required proper sustenance. Walt takes a cautious sip, and I catch the slight surprise on his face when he realizes it's actually good. Your grandmother was the one who got you interested in the stars? She was the one who got me interested in everything. Granny lived by the phases of the moon, planted by the stars, and somehow always knew exactly when the first fireflies would appear each summer. Sounds like she was quite a character. She was magical. Not in any mystical sense, well, maybe a little mystical, but in the way she saw wonder in ordinary things. I take a sip of tea, feeling the familiar warmth. She taught me that paying attention to the natural world wasn't just educational, it was essential. The sun has dropped behind the trees now, and the first real stars are beginning to appear. Venus shines brilliant in the western sky. There's our evening star. Right on schedule. Orbital mechanics rarely disappoint, Walt says, but there's less edge to his voice than usual. We sit in comfortable silence, sharing the trail mix and watching the sky darken. It's peaceful in a way I haven't experienced in months. Can I ask you something? Walt's voice is careful. What brought you to Juniper Falls? It's not exactly a major metropolitan area. I take a longer sip of tea, buying time. The polite answer involves wanting a quieter lifestyle. The honest answer is more complicated. I was burned out, I say finally. Completely, utterly exhausted by the life I'd built for myself. What kind of work were you doing? Corporate consulting. Communication strategy. I laugh, but there's no humor in it. I spent 15 years helping businesses talk to their customers, and somewhere along the way I forgot how to talk to actual human beings. Walt doesn't respond immediately, but I can feel him really listening. My marriage fell apart because my husband said living with me was like being married to a motivational poster. All surface positivity with no real substance underneath. That sounds harsh. It was also accurate. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I'd gotten so good at being what other people expected that I'd lost track of who I actually was. Successful, efficient, and absolutely miserable. So you left. I had what my therapist called a clarity moment. I was sitting in a conference room, listening to executives argue about font choices, and I realized I hadn't looked at the actual sky in months. Hadn't noticed a sunrise or sunset, hadn't seen Venus or tracked the moon phases. And what matters to you now? The question is quiet, genuinely curious. Connection. Real connection. To the natural world, to other people, to something larger than quarterly reports. I gestured toward the darkening sky. This. Sitting in a meadow, sharing tea, watching the universe reveal itself one star at a time. Walt is quiet for a long moment. Your ex-husband, was he wrong about the motivational poster thing? The question surprises a laugh out of me. Probably not entirely. I did turn everything into a learning opportunity. Very exhausting for people around me. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out how to be genuinely myself without being insufferable about it. Today seems successful. There's warmth in his voice that makes me look at him more carefully. In the gathering darkness, his profile is softer, less guarded. What about you? I ask. Have you always lived here? Born and raised. Left for college, came back to teach. He's quiet for a moment. My wife used to say I was like a homing pigeon. I might fly around, but I'd always come back to where I started. It's the first time he's mentioned his wife, and I can hear the grief in his voice. She sounds wise. She was. Ellen would have liked this. Sitting out here, talking about stars and life changes. She always said the best conversations happened under an open sky. His voice is steady, but I catch the slight tightening around his eyes. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. She would have loved meeting you, I think. Ellen always said I needed more people in my life who weren't afraid to challenge my assumptions. The compliment catches me off guard. Thank you for telling me about her. Thank you for sharing your tea. Walt looks up at the sky, where stars are now clearly visible. And for reminding me that there are different ways to appreciate all this. We sit in comfortable silence as full darkness settles over the meadow. Venus burns bright and steady in the west, and I find myself thinking about orbital mechanics and ancient wisdom, about the possibility that wonder and knowledge might not be mutually exclusive after all. Maybe some connections really are written in the stars.
Chapter 4. Walt. I arrive at the community center meeting room with my revised equipment list and what I'm trying to convince myself is cautious optimism rather than actual excitement. Yesterday evening in the meadow felt more natural than I'd anticipated, which is exactly why I need to keep this focused on practical event planning. Celeste is already at the table, her notebook open and a steaming cup beside her elbow. She's wearing jeans and a forest green sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose braid. Good morning, she says, looking up with a smile. I brought coffee if you want some. Regular black coffee, she adds quickly. No lavender. Thank you. I accept the cup gratefully. What's on the agenda? I was thinking we could finalize the activity stations and work out the setup timeline. She flips to a clean page. I also had some thoughts about the children's area. Maybe constellation wheels, or... The door opens with a cheerful jingle of charm bracelet, and Hazel breezes in carrying a plate of muffins. Don't mind me, she says, setting the plate down. I thought you two might need sustenance while you plan. I eye her suspiciously. Hazel doesn't do anything casually. That's very thoughtful, Celeste says, accepting a muffin. How's the planning coming along? Hazel settles into the chair at the head of the table, showing no signs of leaving. Very well, I say carefully. We're just finalizing logistics. Wonderful. I'm so excited about this year's event. Hazel breaks off a piece of muffin, and I recognize the gleam in her eyes that means she's about to drop some saved information. Oh, I nearly forgot. I had a call from the county newspaper yesterday. And someone from the regional tourism board. My coffee cup stops halfway to my mouth. What kind of call? Nothing dramatic, dear. Just interest in covering the event for their community calendar. Apparently word is getting out. She takes a delicate bite. I may have mentioned we have a new co-host this year with fresh ideas that they might want to interview. The coffee tastes suddenly bitter. Hazel, what exactly did you tell them? That this year's event promises to be our best yet. They might send a photographer. For the community interest angle. A photographer. To our astronomy event. Think of all the people who might discover stargazing because they see the article. I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. Think of all the people who might show up expecting some kind of spectacle instead of serious astronomical observation. Walt, Celeste starts, but I'm already spiraling. This is exactly what I was worried about. Turn it into a media event, and suddenly we're not educating people about astronomy, we're performing for cameras. The words are coming faster now, fueled by 15 years of protective instincts. Reporters always want an angle, something to make the story more interesting than just local people look at stars. What kind of angle are you worried about? Celeste asks, her voice carefully neutral. The usual sensationalized nonsense. Local event combines science with mysticism, or Stargazing Night blends astronomy with ancient wisdom. I can practically see the headlines forming. Next thing you know, they'll want quotes about cosmic energy and how the stars affect people's love lives. Celeste winces, and I immediately regret the words. Walt, she says, voice carefully controlled, I think you might be overreacting. Am I? I've spent 15 years building the credibility of this event, and one sensationalized article could undo all of that. What kind of article are you imagining, exactly? There's steel underneath her calm tone. Because I'm having trouble picturing how a community calendar feature could possibly destroy your reputation. Hazel clears her throat. Perhaps I should clarify. The newspaper wants a simple piece about community events. Nothing sensational. And the tourism board just wants to include us in their fall activities guide. I run a hand through my hair, feeling foolish but unable to back down completely. Once you open the door to media attention, you lose control of the narrative. Well, Hazel says, standing and brushing crumbs from her skirt, I can see you two have some things to discuss. I'll lead you to your planning. She pauses at the door, charm bracelet jingling. Walt, dear, sometimes the best way to control a narrative is to trust the people telling it with you. The door closes behind her, leaving Celeste and me in suddenly awkward silence. Walt, Celeste says finally, her voice gentle, what are you really worried about? I stare into my coffee cup, trying to find words for the knot of anxiety in my chest. I've worked so hard to make this event legitimate. Credible. I can't have it turned into some kind of spectacle. A community calendar feature isn't going to turn anything into a spectacle. She leans forward slightly. And even if they do want to highlight our different approaches, is that really so terrible? Maybe some people would be more interested in astronomy if they knew it could include both technical observation and cultural stories. But what if they focus on the wrong things? What if they make it sound like we're mixing science with, I stop myself before saying nonsense. With what? With wonder? With the human experience of looking up at the sky and trying to make sense of what we see? Her voice is calm, matter of fact. Walt, I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to turn this into some New Age crystal session. The image makes me wince slightly. I know you're not that kind of person. Good. She takes a sip of her coffee. Look, if reporters do show up, I'll follow your lead. We can stick to the educational components, the technical aspects, the historical significance of astronomical observations. I promise I won't say anything that would make you cringe. The sincerity in her voice cuts through my defensive spiral. I'm sorry. I know you're not. I mean, you clearly know what you're doing. I do. And so do you. She opens her notebook again. So let's focus on creating an event we're both proud of, and trust that anyone who covers it will see exactly that. Two people who love the stars sharing that love with their community. I look at her across the table, at the careful way she's rebuilding the bridge I nearly burned down with my panic. Yesterday evening, she told me about learning to be authentic without being insufferable. Right now, she's showing me what that looks like. All right, I say, reaching for my own notebook. Let's get back to planning. Good. She smiles, and the tension in the room finally starts to ease. Now, about those constellation wheels for the children's area. The meadow looks different at night, transformed from a practical planning space into something almost mystical. I arrive at 8:30 to find Celeste already setting up her telescope near the spot we designated for planetary observations, her red-filtered flashlight casting a soft glow over the equipment. Perfect timing, she calls softly as I approach with my own gear. Jupiter's just clearing the tree line. The night is crisp but not cold, with barely a breeze to disturb the telescope's stability. Above us, the autumn sky stretches clear and dark, Venus blazing bright in the west while the first stars of evening emerge like scattered diamonds. Good conditions, I observe, setting down my case and beginning the familiar ritual of telescope assembly. No clouds, minimal atmospheric disturbance. And perfect for testing how our equipment works together. Celeste adjusts her finder scope, then glances at my setup. That's a beautiful telescope. What is it? A 10-inch reflector. 12-inch Newtonian. Built it myself about 20 years ago. I can't keep the pride out of my voice as I attach the eyepiece. Ellen helped with the mirror grinding. Said it gave her an excuse to tell people her husband spent his weekends playing with 600 grit and rouge. She sounds like she had a good sense of humor about your hobby. She did. Used to say astronomy was the perfect passion for someone who liked looking at things he couldn't control or understand. I pause, remembering Ellen's teasing smile when she'd make that observation. She wasn't wrong. We work in comfortable silence, the kind that's developed between us over the past few days. Celeste knows her way around equipment, her movements efficient and confident as she calibrates her telescope and sets up a small table for star charts and eyepieces. There, she says finally, stepping back from her scope. Want to test the alignment on Jupiter? I peer through her eyepiece, adjusting the focus until the giant planet swims into sharp relief, its bands clearly visible and 3 of its moons strung out like tiny pearls beside it. Excellent tracking, I say, genuinely impressed. Your polar alignment is spot on. Years of practice. Though I have to admit, having someone else to share this with makes it more fun. She moves to my telescope, bending to look through the eyepiece. Oh, wow. Your optics are incredible. I can see the great red spot. I watch her face in the dim red light, the way her eyes widen with genuine wonder even though she's clearly seen Jupiter hundreds of times before. There's something infectious about her enthusiasm, a reminder of why I fell in love with astronomy in the first place. Try this eyepiece, I say, handing her a higher magnification lens. It'll give you a better view of the atmospheric details. Our fingers brush as she takes the piece from me, and I'm surprised by the small jolt of awareness that runs up my arm. Her skin is warm despite the cool night air, and she doesn't pull away immediately, letting the contact linger for just a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, she says softly, and there's something in her voice beyond gratitude for the eyepiece. She swaps out the lens and returns to the telescope, but I find myself standing closer than I need to, close enough to catch the faint scent of lavender in her hair and the soft sound of her breath as she adjusts the focus. Perfect, she murmurs, then straightens and turns toward me. Walt, I wanted to thank you for this afternoon. For trusting me enough to keep working together after your panic about the media attention. I'm the one who should be thanking you. For not walking out when I acted like a paranoid fool. You weren't being paranoid. You were being protective of something you care about. She's standing close enough that I can see the starlight reflected in her eyes. I understand that impulse. The night seems to wrap around us, creating a bubble of intimacy in the vast darkness. Venus hangs bright and steady overhead, and somewhere in the distance an owl calls from the pine trees. The familiar sounds and sights of my solitary stargazing sessions, but transformed by her presence into something entirely new. Celeste, I start, not sure what I want to say, only knowing that the careful professional distance we've maintained is dissolving under the weight of starlight and shared wonder. She steps closer, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from her body in the cool night air. Yes? Instead of answering, I reach out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear that's escaped from her braid. She turns her face into my palm, her eyes closing for just a moment, and I realize we've crossed some invisible line from colleagues to something infinitely more complicated. I haven't done this in a long time, I admit, my voice rougher than I intended. Neither have I. She opens her eyes, looking at me with a mixture of courage and vulnerability that makes my chest tight. But I'd like to try, if you would. She rises up on her toes, slowly, giving me every opportunity to step away, to retreat into the safety of professional distance. Instead, I find myself meeting her halfway, my hands coming up to frame her face as her lips touch mine. The kiss is gentle at first, tentative, like we're both remembering how this works. Her lips are soft and warm, and she tastes faintly of the chamomile tea she brought in her thermos. I can hear her soft intake of breath, feel the slight tremor in her hands as they come up to rest against my chest, and smell the lavender scent that always seems to surround her. When she sighs against my mouth, something inside me snaps into place. Some piece that's been missing for 3 years suddenly clicks home. I deepen the kiss, pulling her closer, and she responds with an enthusiasm that makes me forget about age and grief and all the reasons this is complicated. For a moment, there's nothing but the sensation of her mouth against mine, the warmth of her body pressed close, the sound of our mingled breathing in the quiet night. The stars will overhead, Venus burns bright in the western sky, and I feel more alive than I have since Ellen died. Then reality crashes back like cold water. What am I doing? Ellen's been gone only 3 years, and here I am kissing another woman under the stars we used to observe together. The guilt hits me like a physical blow, followed immediately by panic at how good this feels, how right it seems despite everything logical in my brain screaming that it's wrong. I pull back abruptly, my hands dropping from her face as if I've been burned. I shouldn't, I mutter, stepping away from her. This isn't. I can't. The hurt that flashes across her face in the red flashlight's glow cuts through me, but I can't seem to stop myself from retreating, from putting distance between us and the dangerous intimacy we just shared. Walt, she says softly, reaching toward me. I have to go. The words come out sharper than I intend, driven by panic and guilt and the overwhelming realization that I want nothing more than to kiss her again. I'm sorry. I can't do this. I turn toward my telescope, hands shaking as I begin the process of breaking down my equipment. Each movement is automatic, muscle memory taking over while my mind reels. Remove the eyepiece, cap the tube, collapse the tripod legs. The familiar routine should be soothing, but instead it feels like I'm dismantling more than just a telescope. Walt, please, Celeste says behind me. Don't leave like this. But I can't turn around, can't look at her face and see the confusion and hurt I know I've put there. I pack my telescope with efficient, desperate movements, my hands remembering what my heart is trying to forget. I'm sorry, I say again without looking at her, shouldering my equipment case. This was a mistake. As I walk toward my truck, Each step feels like I'm walking away from something precious, something I might never get the chance to touch again. But I can't seem to make myself stop, can't turn around and face what I've just broken. The engine turns over on the first try, and as I drive away, I catch a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror. A solitary figure standing beside her telescope in the starlit meadow, one hand pressed to her lips as if she's trying to hold on to what we just shared. I know I've just made the biggest mistake of the past 3 years. But I still can't make myself turn around.
Chapter 5. Celeste. I sit on my front porch the next morning, cradling a cup of coffee that's gone cold while I stare at the mountains without really seeing them. Sleep was elusive last night, my mind replaying those few perfect moments under the stars followed by Walt's abrupt retreat. The taste of chamomile tea and regret lingers in my mouth. The sound of footsteps on my gravel path makes me look up to find Hazel approaching, a covered dish in her hands and concern written across her face. "Good morning, dear." She settles into the wicker chair beside me without waiting for an invitation. "I brought you some of those oatmeal muffins you liked. Thought you might need some comfort food." "How did you?" I start, then stop. This is Hazel. Somehow she always knows when someone in town needs her particular brand of gentle intervention. Rose mentioned she saw Walt's truck leaving the meadow rather quickly last night. "And you look like someone who didn't get much sleep." Hazel removes the cloth from her dish, revealing still warm muffins that smell like cinnamon and care. "Want to talk about it?" I accept a muffin gratefully, though I'm not sure I can actually eat anything. We were testing the telescopes for the event. Everything was going so well, and then I trail off, not sure how to explain what happened without revealing too much. And then Walt remembered he's scared of his own shadow when it comes to opening his heart again? The observation is so accurate it makes me laugh, though the sound comes out more like a sob. Something like that. "Oh, honey." Hazel reaches over to pat my hand. "What happened?" I take a sip of cold coffee, buying time to figure out how much to share. "We had a moment. A nice moment." And then he panicked. Packed up his telescope and left like I'd suddenly sprouted horns. A moment? Heat creeps up my neck. The kind of moment that makes you think maybe you've been reading the signals right, and then makes you wonder if you've completely misunderstood everything. Hazel nods knowingly. The kind that involves getting closer than professional distance would suggest? Maybe. I break off a piece of muffin, crumbling it between my fingers. "Hazel, what if I ruined everything? What if I was too forward, too presumptuous?" He's grieving his wife, and here I am throwing myself at him like some desperate. "Stop right there." Hazel's voice is firm. "You did not throw yourself at anyone. And Walt Bennett is a grown man who's perfectly capable of saying no if he doesn't want something. But he did say no. Eventually. After. I can't bring myself to finish the sentence. After what? After he realized he was enjoying himself? Hazel's green eyes are sharp with understanding. "Celeste, that man has been carrying guilt around like a stone in his pocket for 3 years. It's not about you being too forward. It's about him being too scared." I want to believe her, but the familiar voice of self-doubt is louder this morning. I think I misread the whole situation. He was being polite, and I turned it into something it wasn't. Did he seem like he was just being polite? The question makes me pause, remembering the way Walt looked at me in the starlight, the gentle way he touched my face, the heat in his eyes before panic took over. No, I admit. He seemed interested. Then trust that. Trust what you experienced, not what your fears are telling you. Hazel breaks off a piece of her own muffin. "You know, I've been watching Walt struggle with loneliness for years now. Throwing himself into that astronomy event, into teaching, into anything that would keep him busy enough not to notice how quiet his house is. Maybe he likes the quiet. Nobody likes being that lonely, dear. But Walt's gotten very good at convincing himself he does." Hazel studies my face with the same intensity she probably used to assess struggling students. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean?" I mean, are you going to let one moment of panic convince you to give up on something that might be wonderful? Or are you going to fight for it? I consider this, remembering my conversation with Walt about learning to be authentic without being insufferable. Maybe authenticity means not backing down just because someone gets scared. Maybe it means having the courage to pursue connection even when it's messy and complicated. I don't want to make him uncomfortable, I say finally. We still have to work together on the stargazing event. Of course you do. And that gives you the perfect excuse to spend time with him without making it about anything other than the work. Hazel's smile turned slightly mischievous. Though if some additional moments happen to occur during that work, well, that's just the universe providing opportunities. Despite my mood, I find myself smiling back. You're terrible at pretending you're not matchmaking. I'm excellent at it, actually. I just don't bother pretending with people who are smart enough to see through it anyway. She stands, brushing crumb from her skirt. The point is, Walt needs someone who won't give up on him the first time he gets scared. Someone who understands that healing isn't linear, and connection doesn't always happen on schedule. And you think I'm that someone? I think you're exactly the kind of person who sees wonder in everyday things, who believes in possibilities even when they seem impossible. Hazel picks up her empty dish. The question is whether you believe it too. The parking lot is busier than usual when I arrive for our final walkthrough, and I spot several familiar faces heading toward the meadow. Walt's truck is already here, parked in his usual spot near the library, but there's no sign of him among the small crowd of volunteers. I take a deep breath, straightening my shoulders and checking my reflection in my car window. Professional. Competent. Completely unaffected by whatever happened 2 nights ago under the stars. The lie sits heavy in my chest, but I've had plenty of practice wearing masks when necessary. I find Walt near the telescope stations, deep in conversation with Ben Holloway. He's wearing his usual flannel shirt and baseball cap, his clipboard tucked under one arm, and everything about his posture screams focused professional. When he glances up and sees me approaching, something flickers across his face before settling into polite neutrality. Celeste, he says with a nod that's perfectly cordial and completely impersonal. Good timing. We're reviewing the final setup positions. Great. I pull out my own notebook, matching his tone. I brought the updated activity materials we discussed. Excellent. He doesn't quite meet my eyes. Ben, this is Celeste Morgan, our new co-host. Celeste, Ben's handling security and logistics for the event. Ben shakes my hand with a warm smile that contrasts sharply with Walt's careful distance. Nice to finally meet you. Walt's told me good things about your ideas for the event. Has he? I glance at Walt, who's suddenly very interested in his clipboard. That's nice to hear. We spend the next hour walking through each station, reviewing sight lines and equipment placement with the methodical precision of people who've done this many times before. Walt knows exactly what he's doing. Every detail anticipated, every potential problem solved before it can arise. But where our previous planning sessions felt collaborative, this one feels like I'm being managed rather than consulted. The children's activity area looks perfect here, I say, gesturing toward the spot we'd chosen near the boulders. Good visibility from the main area, but far enough away that excited kids won't disturb the serious observers. Agreed, Walt says, making a note. We'll need 2 tables and a volunteer to supervise. I can handle the supervision. I've worked with children before. That won't be necessary. Sarah volunteered her teenage daughter to help with the kids. His tone is pleasant, professional, and completely dismissive. You'll be more useful helping with the telescope demonstrations. The casual rejection stings more than it should. Of course. Whatever works best. As we move through the remaining stations, I catch Walt stealing glances at me when he thinks I'm not looking, but every time I try to make eye contact, he finds something urgent to discuss with Ben or another volunteer. It's like watching someone perform an elaborate dance designed to avoid any real interaction. When Hazel arrives with a small army of community center volunteers, Walt immediately gravitates toward the group, launching into a detailed explanation of crowd flow patterns that requires his complete attention. I find myself standing slightly apart, holding my notebook and feeling increasingly invisible. Celeste, dear. Hazel's voice cuts through my growing sense of isolation. How are the final preparations going? Very well, I say, summoning a bright smile. Walt has everything organized perfectly. I'm sure he does. He's wonderfully thorough. Hazel glances meaningfully at Walt, who's still deep in conversation 20 feet away. And how are you two working together? Any last-minute concerns? None at all. We make a great team. The words taste like sawdust, but I maintain my cheerful expression. I think people are going to love the event. I'm certain they will. Hazel studies my face with those perceptive green eyes. You seem a bit tired, though. Are you sleeping well? Before I can answer, Walt's voice cuts across the meadow. If everyone could gather around the main telescope station, I'd like to review the evening timeline. I follow the group toward Walt's setup, notebook clutched against my chest like armor. He runs through the schedule with military precision: arrival procedures, safety briefings, guided observations, breakdown protocols. Everything planned to the minute, every contingency covered. Celeste will be handling the cultural astronomy component, he says when he reaches that part of the program. Constellation stories, historical context, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. The dismissive phrasing makes my cheeks burn, but I keep my expression neutral. I'm looking forward to sharing some of the stories behind what we'll be observing. I'm sure our visitors will find it educational, Walt says, and there's something in his tone that makes the words sound like a consolation prize. After the walkthrough ends and volunteers begin dispersing, I hang back, hoping for a chance to talk to Walt privately. But he's busy packing his equipment with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for defusing bombs. Walt, I say finally, approaching his setup. Do you have a minute? Actually, I need to get a few more things from my truck. He doesn't look up from coiling cables. Of course. I watch him work for a moment, noting the careful way he avoids my gaze. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page for tomorrow night. I think the walkthrough covered everything we need to know. He snaps his equipment case closed with more force than necessary. Was there something specific you were concerned about? The question hangs between us, loaded with everything we're not saying. I could force him to acknowledge what happened between us. But the rigid set of his shoulders and the careful politeness in his voice tell me he's built walls that I'm not going to breach in a meadow full of lingering volunteers. No, I say finally. Nothing specific. I'll see you tomorrow night. See you then. He walks away without a backward glance, leaving me standing in the meadow where we'd shared tea and stories just days ago. The place feels different now. Larger, emptier, like something essential has been drained out of it. I gather my things, trying to recapture some of the excitement I felt about this event just a week ago. Tomorrow night, hundreds of people will spread across this meadow to look at the stars. Children will point at constellations for the first time. Couples will make wishes on satellites. Families will create memories that last lifetimes. It should be magical. So why does it feel like I'm preparing for a performance instead of sharing something I love? As I walk back to my car, I catch sight of Venus beginning to appear in the western sky, bright and steady despite the lingering daylight. The evening star, faithful and constant, following her eternal dance across the heavens. Maybe some things are worth holding on to, even when they seem impossible to reach. Or maybe some alignments are just too far apart to bridge, no matter how much you want them to work.
Chapter 6. Walt. The meadow hums with quiet excitement as families spread blankets across the grass. 7 o'clock sharp, and we have our biggest turnout yet. At least 250 people are scattered across the field. The photographer from the county newspaper is already capturing telescope setups, and the tourism board representative makes notes about visitor experience. Everything is going exactly according to plan, which should make me feel satisfied. Instead, I'm wound tight as a spring, hyper-aware of every detail. Walt, this is incredible, Ben says, appearing with his family. The Jennings drove up from Charlotte specifically for this. Good turnout, I agree, scanning the crowd. My eyes find Celeste near the storytelling area, surrounded by children hanging on her every word about Cassiopeia. She's wearing a deep blue sweater, her face animated as she traces the constellation's W shape in the darkening sky. She looks confident, natural, completely in her element. The sight should make me proud. Instead, all I can think about is the taste of chamomile tea and how I ruined everything. The kids love her, Ben observes. Andrew's son has been talking about constellation stories all week. She's good with them. The admission comes out grudgingly. Knows how to make it accessible. I turn back to my telescope, where observers wait to view Jupiter. Focus on the work. Focus on what I can control. The next hour passes in a blur of eyepiece adjustments and explanations about planetary formation. Jupiter shows off its great red spot, Saturn's rings draw gasps, and Venus blazes brilliantly in the western sky. The questions are thoughtful, curious, and are exactly the engagement I've worked 15 years to cultivate. Everything is perfect. So why do I feel like I'm going through familiar motions without really connecting? During a brief lull, I step away to check other stations. The deep sky setup draws crowds around the Orion Nebula, and families with young children stream through the lunar observation area. Red flashlights bob like fireflies, creating exactly the atmosphere of wonder I've always hoped for. I'm heading back when I catch a snippet of conversation from two women near Hazel's refreshment table. Quite the character, isn't she? One says, voice carrying that tone people use when they think they're being discreet. Very enthusiastic about her mythology. Oh, you mean the woo-woo lady? Her companion responds with a laugh. My husband was asking if she reads palms too. All that talk about ancient wisdom and cosmic connections. I suppose it's harmless enough. Though I do feel sorry for Walt Bennett. He's such a serious scientist, and now he has to work with someone who thinks the planets affect her mood. They both laugh, the sound sharp in the gentle night air. I freeze behind a nearby telescope as their conversation continues. Still, she's certainly popular with the children. Very theatrical. Theatrical is exactly the word. Though I suppose some people find that entertaining. The words hit like physical blows, landing exactly where my deepest fears live. This is what I was afraid of. Celeste reduced to a caricature, our event turned into amusement for people who don't understand what we're trying to accomplish. Worse, they pity me. Poor Walt Bennett, serious scientist, stuck with the eccentric lady. I force myself to walk away, but the damage is done. Their laughter follows me across the meadow, turning everything sour. Near the storytelling area, Celeste finishes with teenagers, her hands gesturing gracefully as she explains how sailors use Polaris for navigation. She's completely absorbed, unaware that people 20 yards away are dismissing her as a sideshow. The protective instinct that flares catches me off guard. I want to march back and explain exactly how qualified Celeste is, how much research goes into her presentations, how her approach expands access to astronomy in ways my technical explanations never could. Instead, I stand frozen between my telescope and her storytelling circle, caught between the urge to defend her and the paralyzing fear that those women might be right. That I've compromised the credibility I've spent 15 years building. Mr. Bennett? A young voice breaks through my spiral. Could we look at Saturn again? I turn to find a boy of maybe 10 standing hopefully beside my telescope. Of course, I manage, grateful for the distraction. Saturn's particularly beautiful tonight. As I guide them through the observation, I try to push the conversation out of my mind. But the words keep echoing, woo-woo lady, theatrical, poor Walt Bennett. Across the meadow, Celeste's laugh carries on the night air as she shares some story about Venus. The sound is warm, genuine, full of the infectious enthusiasm that drew me to her. The crowd has thinned considerably by 10:30, families with young children heading home while the dedicated stargazers settle in for the long haul. I've been avoiding the storytelling area all evening, but now I spot Celeste standing alone beside my telescope, adjusting the eyepiece with practiced movements. She looks up as I approach, her expression carefully neutral in the red filtered light. I was just checking the focus. Jupiter's drifted slightly since your last group. Thank you. I take the eyepiece from her, our fingers brushing briefly. She doesn't pull away, but she doesn't linger either. Good catch. The Hendersons were asking about deep sky objects. I told them you'd be back shortly. Her voice is polite, professional, exactly the tone she's been using with me all evening. I appreciate that. We stand in awkward silence, surrounded by the gentle murmur of remaining observers and the distant sound of someone adjusting a telescope mount. Venus hangs bright in the western sky, and I can't help remembering another night when we stood under these same stars without all this careful distance between us. Celeste, I start, not sure what I want to say but knowing I need to say something. Yes? The event went well. Your presentations were well received. But what? There's clearly a but coming. You've been avoiding me all evening, Walt. If you have something to say about my performance, just say it. The word performance hits exactly wrong, echoing the conversation I overheard earlier. It wasn't a performance, I say, more sharply than I intend. Wasn't it? Because that's sure what it felt like. She crosses her arms, and I can see the careful composure starting to crack. You've treated me like hired help all week. Polite, distant, completely professional. Like we're strangers instead of people who... She trails off, but I know what she was going to say. People who kissed under the stars. People who shared stories and tea and something that felt dangerously close to real connection. Celeste, it's complicated. No, it's not. Her voice is getting louder, and I glance around nervously, hoping we're far enough from other observers not to be overheard. You're ashamed of me. Ashamed of working with someone who talks about mythology and cultural astronomy instead of just spouting technical specifications. That's not. Isn't it? You've been acting like I'm some kind of embarrassment ever since we kissed. Like associating with me is going to damage your precious scientific reputation. The accusation stings because it's not entirely wrong. You don't understand the position I'm in. I've spent 15 years building credibility for this event, and what? Having me here threatens that credibility? Her eyes flash with anger now, all pretense of professional politeness gone. Because I dare to suggest that there's more than one way to appreciate the stars? Because you treat astronomy like entertainment. The words explode out of me, fueled by hours of suppressed anxiety and the echo of dismissive laughter. Stories and mythology and cosmic connections, it's not serious science, Celeste. It's performance art. She steps back like I've slapped her. Performance art. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Her voice has gone quiet now, which is somehow worse than the anger. You think what I do is frivolous. A sideshow to the real astronomy you provide. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. And you know what? You're right about one thing. We don't belong in the same professional space. She turns away from me, looking up at the stars with an expression I can't read. I was trying to share wonder, to help people connect with something larger than themselves. But you want me to stay in my designated corner, telling pretty stories to children while you handle the serious adult conversations. Celeste, please. No. She faces me again, and I can see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I thought we could build something together. Something that honored both science and wonder, facts and stories. But you can't get past your fear that working with me makes you look less serious. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You'd rather be alone with your telescopes and your certainties than risk having someone challenge your approach. She shakes her head, a bitter smile crossing her face. Maybe the stars were right about one thing. We don't belong in each other's orbits. She starts to walk away, then pauses and looks back. For what it's worth, Walt, tonight was magical. The families loved it, the children learned something, and maybe a few people will go home and look up at the sky with new appreciation. That should matter more than whatever those gossiping women at the refreshment table thought about my presentation style. My stomach drops. You heard them? I hear a lot of things. The difference is, I don't let other people's opinions dictate how I share what I love. She takes a step back, then another. Enjoy your solitude, Walt. I'm sure it's much safer than risking connection with someone who might actually challenge you to grow. She turns and walks away across the meadow, her figure disappearing into the darkness beyond the range of our red flashlights. I stand frozen beside my telescope, watching her go and knowing I've just made the second biggest mistake of the past 3 years. The first was kissing her. The second was letting her walk away.
Chapter 7. Celeste. I almost say no when Hazel calls about the sunset hike. It's been 3 days since my argument with Walt in the meadow, and I've spent most of that time questioning every decision that brought me to Juniper Falls. It's a small group, Hazel says. Hunter's leading it. Might be exactly what you need to clear your head. I know I should decline, but something in Hazel's voice, gentle insistence that feels like care, makes me agree. When I arrive at the trailhead, I find Hunter Rhodes waiting with his usual quiet demeanor. Just us today, he says simply. Sometimes the best hikes are the quiet ones. We start up the familiar trail through the pine forest, Hunter setting an easy pace. The October air is crisp, and late afternoon light filters through trees in golden shafts. Hazel mentioned you might need some mountain perspective, Hunter says after 20 minutes. Is that what she called it? Among other things. She has a way of knowing when someone needs to see something they didn't know they were looking for. We climb higher in comfortable silence. Hunter doesn't press for details, and I'm grateful. It's soothing to move through the forest with someone who doesn't feel the need to fill every quiet moment. After almost an hour, the trail levels out through a grove of birch trees. Hunter glances back with an expression I can't read. Almost there. Fair warning. Sometimes the destination isn't what you expect. We round a final bend and the trees open to reveal Lookout Point. The familiar vista spreads below. Juniper Falls nestled in the valley, mountains rolling to the horizon, Venus beginning to appear in the deepening sky. And there, sitting alone on the flat boulder, is Walt. Hunter disappears into the trees with practiced discretion. Walt looks up as I approach, his expression uncertain, almost vulnerable. Before you leave, he says quietly, would you give me 5 minutes? I notice the telescope beside the boulder, a small table with a thermos and cups, a blanket spread across the rock. And there, propped against the thermos, a copy of Venus Rising, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Hearts. Papers stick out between the pages. Notes that suggest Walt has been reading it. 5 minutes, I agree, curiosity overriding hurt. I settle beside him on the sun-warmed rock, maintaining careful distance. He pours chamomile tea. I've been reading, he says without preamble. Made notes. Looked up cultural references you mentioned. I pick up the book, flipping through pages filled with Walt's careful handwriting. Questions and margins, cross-references to astronomical phenomena, attempts to correlate ancient astronomy with modern calculations. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He stares out at the valley. I've been wrong, Celeste. About everything. Walt. Let me finish. He turns to face me, something raw in his hazel eyes. You asked what I was really afraid of. I'm afraid of being irrelevant. When I retired, I lost my sense of purpose. It got worse when my wife passed. The stargazing event became the only thing that made me feel useful. I wait while Venus grows brighter. Then you showed up with your enthusiasm and fresh ideas and ability to make children laugh while teaching stellar navigation. You were better at it than me. More natural, more engaging. Instead of being grateful, I was terrified you'd make me obsolete. Walt. The night we kissed, I panicked because it felt too good. Because caring about you meant risking something I wasn't sure I was brave enough to lose. He sets down his cup, hands trembling slightly. I heard those women at the event, and instead of defending you, I let their ignorance confirm my worst fears. I heard them too. I know. And you handled it with more grace than I've handled any of this. He flips to a marked page. This section about Venus representing transformation made me think about second chances. I look at the page where he's written observations about orbital mechanics alongside mythological symbolism. Exactly the integration I'd hoped we could achieve. What are you saying? I'm saying I was wrong. About your approach, about what you bring to astronomy, about thinking I had to choose between facts and wonder. He closes the book gently. If you're willing to give me another chance, I'd like to try building something together. The words settle between us as stars begin to appear. Below, Juniper Falls twinkles with warm lights. I'm scared too, I admit. Not of being irrelevant, but of being too much again. Of having someone decide my enthusiasm and beliefs are embarrassing. You're not too much. Walt's voice is fierce. You're exactly what I didn't know I needed. When Walt reaches for my hand, I don't pull away. His fingers are warm, calloused from years of telescope work, and they fit around mine with surprising rightness. Ellen would have wanted you to be happy again, I say softly. Even if that happiness looked different than before. Walt's grip tightens. I think so too. It just took me a while to believe I deserved it. And I had to learn that wanting connection doesn't make me desperate. It makes me human. When he leans toward me this time, it's slow and deliberate. I choose to meet him, rising up as his hand cups my face with gentle reverence. This kiss is different. It's not tentative or desperate, but steady and sure. Like everything we've built through planning meetings and shared stories and careful trust. Walt tastes like chamomile tea and mountain air, and when I sigh against his mouth, he doesn't panic. Instead, he deepens the kiss, and I can feel years of loneliness melting away. We break apart slowly, foreheads touching, breathing the same night air while Venus blazes overhead. So, Walt asks softly, what happens now? I look at the telescope, the blanket, the book filled with his attempts to understand my world. Now we figure out what we're building together. One star at a time. I like the sound of that. Good, I say, settling against his shoulder to watch stars emerge above Lookout Point. Because I have a feeling this is going to be the adventure of a lifetime. As we sit together under the infinite sky, fingers intertwined and hearts finally aligned, I can't help thinking the universe knew exactly what it was doing when it brought us together. Some things really are written in the stars. Even if it takes a while to learn how to read them. Epilogue. Celeste. Juniper Falls, 3 months later. The meadow looks different in winter. It's smaller somehow, and more intimate, with frost sparkling on the bare grass like scattered diamonds. Walt and I have bundled ourselves in scarves and heavy coats, our breath creating small clouds in the crisp January air as we set up our telescopes side by side. Perfect night for it, Walt says, adjusting his eyepiece. No moon to wash out the faint objects. And no crowds to manage, I add, pouring chamomile tea from my thermos into 2 travel mugs. Just us and the stars. These private stargazing sessions have become our favorite tradition over the past 3 months. No agenda, no educational objectives, just the simple pleasure of sharing wonder under an infinite sky. Tonight feels different though. Walt seems nervous, fidgeting with his equipment more than usual. Celeste, he says suddenly, abandoning his telescope to face me. Do you remember the first constellation you showed me from a mythological perspective? I smile, remembering that evening when everything changed between us. Cassiopeia. The vain queen who boasted about her beauty and got herself stuck upside down in the sky as punishment. Right. You also mentioned she was a symbol of perseverance. About learning to find grace even when life puts you in an uncomfortable position. Walt, are you feeling philosophical about star patterns again? Instead of answering, he reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. My breath catches as he opens it to reveal a simple, elegant ring with a stone that catches the starlight like captured Venus. I've been thinking about constellations, he says, his voice soft but steady. How they're just individual stars that happen to align from our perspective on Earth. Separate, but connected. Creating something beautiful together. My heart is beating so fast I'm surprised it doesn't fog up my glasses. Celeste Morgan, Walt continues, dropping to one knee on the frost-covered ground. How about we keep watching the stars together for the rest of our lives? Yes, I whisper, tears blurring the night sky into sparkles. Yes, absolutely yes. He slips the ring onto my finger with hands that shake slightly from cold or emotion or both, and then we're kissing under the winter stars, holding each other close enough to share warmth and wonder and the promise of all the nights like this still ahead of us. Half an hour later, we stumble into Willa's tea parlor, faces flushed from cold and happiness, our telescopes packed away for the night. The cozy shop glows with warm yellow light, and the scent of bergamot and cinnamon wraps around us like a hug. Walt. Celeste. Willa Merritt looks up from where she's cleaning cups behind the counter, her blonde hair pinned up in its usual neat bun. What brings you two out so late on such a cold night? We were stargazing, Walt says, helping me out of my coat. Thought we'd warm up before heading home. Willa's sharp eyes immediately catch the ring glinting on my left hand. Oh my stars, she exclaims, clasping her hands together. Is that what I think it is? Walt proposed, I say, unable to keep the grin off my face. Under Cassiopeia. How perfectly romantic. Willa bustles toward her tea collection, despite the late hour. This calls for my special Starry Night blend. I insist. And I think I have some shortbread left from this afternoon. As she prepares our celebratory tea, I notice the sound of footsteps overhead. New tenant? Walt asks, apparently hearing it too. Just moved in yesterday, Willa says, measuring loose tea leaves with practiced precision. Quiet fellow. A bit brooding, if you ask me. He keeps to himself, but I have a feeling Juniper Falls might surprise him. She glances up at the ceiling with a knowing smile. It has a way of doing that to people who think they want to be left alone. She sets steaming mugs in front of us, the tea fragrant with lavender and chamomile and something that tastes like starlight would if starlight had a flavor. To new beginnings, Willa says, raising her own cup in a toast. And to the magic of finding exactly what you need when you least expect it. Walt and I clink our mugs together, and I think about constellations and second chances and the beautiful unpredictability of a universe that brought a grumpy astronomer and a hopeful astrologer together under the same patch of sky. Some things really are written in the stars. All you have to do is be brave enough to read them. The end. This has been Starlight Serenade. Written by Susanne Ash. Copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Production copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want me to put more of my books on YouTube. Visit my website at www.susanneash.com for more of my books or find me on Amazon.